Good morning, everyone. As Nathan so kindly introduced me, my name is Sloan Kanaski. I am one of the congregants here at CBC. I am notably not one of the pastors, as all of our pastors are away for various reasons. But Ecclesiastes is my favorite book of the Bible. So Pastor Stem thought it would be fitting if I gave us our introductory sermon to our sermon series on the Book of Ecclesiastes. So for anyone who isn't familiar, the Book of Ecclesiastes is one of the wisdom books in the Old Testament, which means that at least at a very high level, it's talking about wisdom. How do you live your life well and in accordance with God and how He wants you to live your life, right? But unlike the more typical wisdom books like Proverbs, which is all about do this and good things will happen to you, don't do that, or bad things will happen to you, Ecclesiastes takes a very different approach, which I'm sure you may have noticed in our reading this morning. But to start from the beginning, the book recounts the words of the teacher, son of David, king in Jerusalem. That's from verse 1. Many take this to refer to King Solomon, since he is a famously wise king, the direct son of David who ruled in Jerusalem. Other people challenge this interpretation, potentially applying it to a later king in the Davidic line, or even to a much later teacher who just sort of assumes a Solomon-like persona. But at the end of the day, it doesn't entirely matter who the teacher is. The relevant detail is that they're a person who has accumulated a lot of wisdom, a lot of wealth, experienced a lot of what the world has to offer, and they're coming away from it not feeling filled, but feeling empty. Anyone who knows Solomon's story will see why people often connect this to Solomon. One of my favorite sort of like side interpretations is that Proverbs was written early in Solomon's life when he was still idealistic, and Ecclesiastes was written by Solomon late in his life when he was sort of world-weary and jaded. But that's a little fanciful, so don't take that too much to heart. But I think it kind of gets at the heart of what this book is talking about at the beginning with verse 2. Meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher. Utterly meaningless, everything is meaningless. Wow. The Hebrew word for meaningless is hevel, sometimes also translated in English as vanity, as you'll see in the ESV Bibles in your pews, or sometimes translated as futility. Understanding this word is crucial to understanding what the book of Ecclesiastes is trying to say. Literally, the Hebrew word hevel means something like mist or smoke or breath, right? It's something vaporous that has like a visible presence, but isn't really substantial. And symbolically, they're using that to discuss the nature of human existence, right? Where humans are fleeting. In the eyes of the cosmos, right, we are only here for a blink and then we're gone. But at the same time, we look at our lives and we think that we can do so much to control them, right? You think you can reach out and you can grasp the mist. You can grasp the vapor because it looks just so real and so solid, which of course is absurd when you talk about it in the context of mist, right? But the central claim of the book is that we're following that same absurd pattern in our own lives, that we try to control and grasp all of these things around us that in reality are completely and utterly beyond our control. And in that ensuing struggle and that ensuing chase, you're looking for a safety and a security that simply doesn't exist. But it's important to note that this rather disheartening perspective is not the only perspective that the book has to offer. There is a subtle second character in the book that's very easy to miss because they only speak twice, once at the very beginning, once at the very end. This is the author or the narrator. We see them speak at the beginning when they introduce the teacher, and then from then on it's the teacher speaking. But they speak again at the very end of the book in chapter 12. I want to, at the risk of spoilers, read that ending to chapter 12 because I think it is essential to understanding the message of this book. For people who want to follow along in their pew Bibles, this will be page 648. As with Nathan, I will be reading the NIV, however, so there will be some slight differences in wording if you choose to follow along line by line. This is Ecclesiastes chapter 12, verses 9 through 14. Not only was the teacher wise, but he also imparted knowledge to the people. He pondered and searched out and set in order many proverbs. The teacher searched to find just the right words, and what he wrote was upright and true. The words of the wise are like goads, their collected sayings like firmly embedded nails, given by one shepherd. Be warned, my son, of anything in addition to them. Of making many books there is no end, and much study wearies the body. Now all has been heard. Here is the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the duty of all mankind. For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every hidden thing, whether it is good or evil. So the final message of the book, after all of the nihilistic ramblings that we're going to see over the coming weeks, is fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the duty of all mankind. Great! So we just obey God and everything will be fine, right? If only it were so simple. But at the same time as this obedience to God in the face of all this nihilism, it's important to note that the author is commending what the teacher is saying, not criticizing it, right? So it's not that, oh, none of what was just said matters, just obey God and everything will be fine. No, he says that the teacher was wise and that all of what he wrote was upright and true, which is kind of uncomfortable for us as humans. Proverbs is a much more comfortable book of, oh, good, we do good things and good things happen to us. That's so nice. Ecclesiastes is a very uncomfortable book of, you do all the good things and good things don't happen. We can see this a little bit in this final bit in chapter 12 and much more in chapter 1, as we'll talk about in a moment, when the author is saying, of making many books there is no end, and much study wearies the body. So even though he's commending all of this wisdom that the teacher is imparting, at the same time, you could keep writing wisdom books for days and days, years and years, and you would never write it all. All you would do is just exhaust yourself, wear yourself down to the bone. And so that's kind of the tension that this book is exploring, right? That you have this good thing, you do this good thing, and good things may happen, but also good things might not happen, right? Sometimes you do the good thing and bad things happen anyways. You can do the good thing as much as you want. Sometimes bad things are just going to happen. And in doing it so much, sometimes you make it even worse, right? You can just weary yourself beyond imagining by trying and trying and trying and trying. And that's the central tension, right? Good thing, good outcome? No, sometimes good thing, bad outcome. What do we do with that? At the end of the day, the world is beyond our control. And sometimes, no matter what we do, things are going to spin out of control. And when everything is out of control, what do we do? With that question, let's return to chapter 1. So, starting from verse 3 onward, chapter 1, or at least up until verse 11, so in 3 through 11, chapter 1 talks about two main things. One of them is toil or work, and the other is novelty, the pursuit of that which is new. I'm sure work is something that we're all intimately familiar with, and work is a good thing. If you don't work, things don't get done. And when things don't get done, typically there are consequences, right? Food doesn't get put on the table, bills don't get paid, electricity goes out, heat goes out. Suddenly we're all at imminent risk of grisly deaths. So work is good. We have to work in order to live, right? We need to find food, we need to find shelter, we need to find water, we need to find all of these things that are essential for us to continue our existence, right? But at the same time, what is our work really accomplishing, right? I think it's much easier for us to see this in the modern day, in the corporate world, where a lot of jobs have become so abstracted that it's hard to feel like you're doing something concrete. I'm a software developer, for example. What am I really accomplishing by writing some words on a screen? I mean, I am accomplishing things, right? Those words do things. There are people that use that software and expect it to behave in a certain way, and I'm telling the software how to behave, and it's hopefully doing the thing that I told it to do, or at least that I meant to tell it to do. But it definitely, because it's so abstract and disconnected, it feels a lot more meaningless. But the author is writing at a time where that level of abstraction wasn't as common in labor, right? This was a time of farmers and artisans where you're typically making or working on physical things, but the same idea still applies. As a farmer, right, you want to plant your crops, you want to water them, you want to tend to them, you want to make sure that they grow. And if you're being wise about it, right, you're thinking ahead, right? Maybe you're rotating your fields so that they'll flourish more in the grand scheme of things. That's what the Israelites were commanded to do in their Old Testament law. Maybe you're thinking of other ventures that you can do. Maybe you're raising animals along with your plants, right? All sorts of these things that you can do to try to make sure that you're providing more and more for yourself. But at the end of the day, and this is where he gets into with the sun rises and the sun sets and so forth, what difference are you really making in the face of all that nature is, right? You might just not get rain one season, yikes. Or, there's a bad storm, now your plants are dead, right? You can work as hard as you want to, and sometimes there will be things that happen that you can't stop. And creation just keeps plodding along with or without you, right? The waters keep flowing, the winds keep blowing, the sun keeps rising and setting. You need more time in the day? Tough. The sun's still moving. You need the flood to stop? Tough. The waters are still flowing. Which is a discouraging thing to hear, right? We love to have this idea that, if we work hard enough, we'll be okay. We'll be safe, right? I just need to work that extra hour and I'll be safe. I'll have job security, I'll have enough money, I'll have enough things. But sometimes there's an earthquake. Sometimes there's a hurricane. Sometimes there's, a fire. Any number of things that could happen that you have no agency over, and then all of your hard work goes out the window in an instant. All things are wearisome, more than one can say. Or, to go earlier in the chapter, meaningless, says the teacher. Utterly meaningless, everything is meaningless. When everything can just disappear in the blink of an eye, what is the point? Moving on into the later section of our reading. The eye never has enough of seeing, nor the ear its fill of hearing. What has been will be again. What has been done will be done again. There is nothing new under the sun. So this idea of novelty, of things that are new, I think you can take in two main directions here. You can take it in the direction of pursuit of novelty in the space of pleasure, right? Where, you're searching out maybe new video games or new books or new music, new experiences, right? To make you feel at ease in the world, to comfort you in the midst of life's many uncertainties. Or you can take it in the direction of human innovation, humans trying to do or make or create new things that will further stave off that uncertainty, that insecurity. And I think we can all pretty easily attest to the fact that new things can be good, but too many new things can be bad. Pleasure can be good. Too much of a pleasurable thing often turns bad, right? But really, at the end of the day, all of our pursuit of new things, we're not really actually finding things that are new, right? You can make an invention that reduces the amount of labor that it takes to plant crops, but then somebody still has to manage that invention and maintain that device, and then understanding how it operates is another level of complexity. And so at the end of the day, how much work have you really saved yourself, right? You've just shifted the problem. to a different type of problem. I think we see that a lot these days with some of the technological innovations that have been all the rage in the media. Look at AI, for instance, right? AI can do incredible things, right? And people talk about it like it's this magical cure-all problem solver thing. But as with any new tool, it might be better than previous tools at addressing certain problems, but it comes with its own issues, right? AI can be unreliable in a way that typical computer programs are not. So now you have that extra level of, okay, it can generate these things faster than I could by myself, but now I need to double check its output. Now I need to make sure that we have people that can double check all the things that are coming out of this AI, right? You've just shifted the problem. So for all of the new things that humanity can create, we're not really changing the human condition in like a fundamental sense. We're just shifting where the burden of responsibility lies. Which does kind of feel futile when you frame it like that. And don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to claim that innovation is bad. I think that's a preposterous way to view innovation. Look at the many wondrous improvements that things like medicine or things like mass production have brought to the standard of living of most people. Again, there's a lot of nuance here, right? There have been many negative consequences to those new innovations as well, but by and large, I think a lot of people are better off by improvements in medicine than they were 1,000 years ago when a simple infection could potentially kill you. And at the same time, there are so many things that we don't know about medicine and so many problems that we cannot address effectively, right? We are just futilely striving in the face of an unimaginably large, unfathomably complex universe. We are small. That is the core point of Ecclesiastes 1, the section of it that we read. So in the face of our cosmic insignificance, what do we do? What's our response here? Because it seems like the author is kind of spiraling. He's having a bad day. And you know, sometimes we have our bad days too. But ideally, we would like to not stay there because having all bad days is a bad time. Nobody wants that. So when we're spinning out of control, when everything seems bad, what do we do? I will turn us back to chapter 12 for a moment because, as I said, it provides an answer there, which on the surface might not seem satisfying, but I want to dig into it a little bit more. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the duty of all mankind. Instead of focusing on the obedience part, which I'll talk about in a moment, I want to talk about the duty part, because the duty part is interesting here. What does it mean for this to be our duty? You could take it many ways, right? You can think of duty as an obligation. But I would like to frame it a little differently for the purposes of today's discussion. As I was thinking about this idea of duty, I couldn't help but coming back to the military. Now, I'm not intimately familiar with the military as it exists, right? Most of my knowledge of military structures comes from the media, and we all know how reliable the media can be. But as I understand it, there is a great sense of duty in the military to follow orders. And the purpose of that hierarchy and of those orders is that when everything becomes chaotic and uncontrolled, as things inevitably will in a combat situation, there are orders, you can follow the orders, you know what to do. Everything's flying out of control, I was told to do this thing, I'm going to do the thing. And then you hope for the best. Now, obviously, our situation with God is very different from a military chain of command. God is not asking for blind obedience. He's not going to kick us out of the military if we don't obey our orders, right? Our relationship with God is not a relationship with a commanding officer. But I think the duty that he's talking about here fills much the same role, where, okay, everything is swirling out of control around us. What do we do? Well, God has given you some advice for the things that you can do, and they might not always make sense. You might not necessarily always know how to apply them to your life in that moment, but if you can figure out what keeping God's commandments and fearing God looks like in that moment, that's a good thing to do. It anchors you in the midst of things that are out of control and gives you a path forward. I think liturgy and ritual and worship services can play much the same role, where when you're broken or filled with grief or sorrow or otherwise unable to conjure the words of a prayer yourself, of the prayer that you've said on Sunday 1,000 times in liturgy, you can just say that. It just springs to mind immediately. Obviously, we're not a very liturgical church. Very rarely do we do those kinds of recitations together, but there are similar concepts everywhere, right? Of this is a thing that we always do together, like singing songs, like the call to worship, where Kim read a psalm, an excellent psalm for Ecclesiastes 1, I will add. So when everything is spinning out of control, we can look to obeying God as a way to move forward. It doesn't guarantee that things will stop spinning out of control. It doesn't guarantee that good things will happen, but it allows us to move forward. The core question of this sermon series will be, what does obedience look like in each of these situations that Ecclesiastes is talking about? Because, as I'm sure we've all experienced, sometimes obeying God is not as simple as we would like it to be. It's not always clear what he's actually asking us to do in any given situation. What I would like to do now, then, is to propose some ideas of what God is asking us to do in the face of our cosmic insignificance. And, like I said, it's not going to make the cosmic insignificance go away. It's not going to stop the world from being outside of our control, but it helps ground us. And my advice is this: in the face of your smallness, the only response that you can possibly have is humility. And once again, caveats. When I say humility, I don't mean the kind of self-abasing, I'm terrible, I am worthless humility. That's not what we're talking about here. That's not what God wants from us, right? As we saw in our kids' song, even though we are small, God cares for us and loves us dearly. He's not saying that we are worthless because we are small and we should not think the same. Instead, what humility asks of us is an awareness of our reality. To know that you are small and to know what that means for your life. You can't control the things that are outside of your control precisely because they are outside of your control. Stop trying to. It's not going to work. You can only do so much. Know where your limits are. Do as much as you can. What else can you do? It doesn't stop there, of course. If you just sat around all day contemplating the reality of your smallness, I don't think that would be that fulfilling of a life. It can be comforting for many people, I'm sure. I'm not one of them. But you can take that humility and you can put it into action in your life. So, for instance, when we're talking about novelty and consumption, right? How much of that new thing do you actually need? Are you actually going to benefit from, right? If I'm playing a video game and I play 1 hour of it, I have a great time. If I play 2 hours of it, I still have a great time. By hour 8, I am not having a good time anymore, but I don't really want to stop, right? And there's a lot of levels there, right? There's a lot feeding into that, right? There's like an element of addiction, right? There's an element of escapism. You don't want to go back to your life and face whatever other things that's happening. But there's also an element of, yes, more of this thing will be better. No, that's not how that works. right? The reality is, some of it is good, too much of it is not. Find where that line is, right? Don't do so much of the thing. The same applies to technological innovations, right? Find the situations where they're actually good and use them there. Don't try and use them everywhere. Don't think that magically improving your productivity with AI is going to magically solve all of your problems. No, find the situations where AI actually applies to. Your phone cannot magically solve all of your problems. Having a new phone is not going to magically solve all of your problems, but getting a new phone might improve some important piece of the phone's functionality that is actually relevant to you. In that case, maybe it makes sense. I don't know. This could be applied in a number of ways, right? But part of knowing your limits is also knowing the limits of how you interact with the world, right? Knowing what parts of the world are actually going to be beneficial to you and how much of those things are going to be beneficial to you. And obviously it takes some experimentation to find where those limits are for each individual person, but that's part of what we have to do as humans living in a world where we have to interact with the world. But it's not just us, right? We're not in this alone. When you know that you're small, you know that you can't do things yourself. Thankfully, you don't have to do everything yourself. There are people around you. You can do things with other people. One human cannot withstand an earthquake. Many humans can collaborate and build a building that can withstand an earthquake. Obviously, there are earthquakes that are so big that no human building could withstand. Again, even the collective force of human community is still small in the face of the cosmos, but we're not as small as a community as we are as individuals. You may not be able to impact the movement of the cosmos. You can't stop the sun from spinning, as we've said, but you can have an impact on the people around you. You can brighten somebody's day. You can assist somebody with something they're having difficulty with, carrying groceries, accomplishing a task at work, any number of small things that you can do that makes our collective lives on this earth easier. And this is a lot of what God is calling us to do in this world, is to be a community, to be a light to the world around us. God's not asking us to single-handedly change the world and change the hearts and minds of the people around us. Only God can change human hearts. Only God can change the state of the world and the state of humanity. But we play an important role in that, in being his messengers to those people. He wants us to participate in that process of slowly, gradually, incrementally improving things. And at the end of the day, we are promised that he will work it all together in some way that is way beyond our understanding, and things will get better. We don't know when, we don't know how long, etc. But right now, all we can do is what we have been commanded to do, which is try and improve the lives of the people around us. So I leave you with this final reminder that you are small, and God loves you infinitely despite that smallness. God doesn't care that you're small. He has the utmost attention for you and all of your needs. Your time is not a burden to God because God is infinite. And in his infinity lives a love beyond our imagining for every single one of us. So let us share that love with the world and the people around us as well. Please pray with me. Dear God, we gather here together before you today in humble acknowledgement of our finiteness, of our smallness, and in the futility of all the things that we try to accomplish on our own. But we also know at the same time, Lord, how deep your love for us is, and how much you can accomplish through us, how much we can accomplish through you, and how much we can accomplish together. Would you grant us the courage to share our lives in community with those around us? Would you grant us the wisdom to see the path that you have set for us and our communities, that we might walk it and that your works might be accomplished in this world. And would you grant us peace in the midst of the storms of life as we are confronted with our smallness and our inability to control the many hazards that this world has to offer. So would you heal those who are broken, comfort those who are grieved, Lord. Help us all to move through this world in the knowledge of who you are and who we are to you. In Jesus Christ's name we pray. Amen.